we're here today to talk all about visible thinking routines in the English language classroom. So we're going to sort of go through this fairly systematically. First of all, looking at what exactly visible thinking routines are. Maybe it's something you're familiar with, maybe it's something you think you know a little bit about, maybe it's something completely new to you. We'll then briefly look at a why. Why should we be bringing them into the English language classroom? And then the bulk of the session will be giving you lots of practical, hands-on, takeaway ideas for you to go and use and try in your classrooms. So how we can utilize them. But before we do any of that, I want you to think really about what our role as educators actually is. So yes, we teach a subject, we teach English language, and other teachers teach history and science and maths and geography and social studies. But looking at it more holistically, what is our goal, or what is the goal of 21st century education beyond just teaching our subject? So have a think about that question and write down any responses for me in the chat box. Purpose. Okay, to encourage reflection and critical thinking, certainly that's part of it, Isabel, yeah? We want them to think critically, lots of critical thinking going on, yeah? But it's not just about critical thinking, is it? I love that, Sunday. To be able to navigate the world easily after school, absolutely. To mobilize them, to teach them how to learn, to be creative, thank you, Miranda. To question and explore through questioning and reflection. Intercultural communication, to be able to communicate with anybody, future-ready skills, collaboration, life skills. Thank you, Anne. I mean, the list goes on and on and on, right? Which means we're all on the same page here. Education is more than just teaching a subject. It's about giving them the set of skills, the abilities, the knowledge, but also the values that they need to develop in order to succeed in learning, work, and life in the information age. And, you know, we think about what these skills and abilities are. We talk about them as future-ready skills, as soft skills, as 21st century skills, as global skills. You know, everyone seems to call them a different name, but they're all essentially skills which are going to help to prepare our students for success outside of the classroom, as well as inside the classroom too. But thinking about these skills, you know, trying to sort of put them in order of what's most important is you know, an impossible scenario. But I think not least amongst these skills is the ability for, well, their cognitive skills, their thinking skills. And when I talk about that, what I really mean is their higher order thinking skills specifically, their ability to apply knowledge, to analyze, to evaluate, to create. Because I think for far too long, students have been spoon-fed information, arguably not through any fault of their own, but they've been spoon-fed this information, meaning that they've developed really good lower order thinking skills, so the ability to understand and remember, but those higher order thinking skills are lacking. And certainly when they get to a university age, it is a skill that is absolutely vital. So it's something that we need to be integrating into our classrooms from as early an age as possible, really, but definitely within, you know, upper secondary and moving into university age students. And one way in which we can do that very, very easily, I hasten to add, is through using visible thinking routines. So what exactly are these visible thinking routines? Well, before I give you a definition, can you just let me know in the chat box if you've heard of this expression before, or this idea? Say yes. If you think, oh, maybe, but I'm not sure, put not sure. And if you're definitely not, put a no for me, just so I have an idea. Okay, quite a few not sures. Thinking loud. Well, someone's mentioned there, John Hattie, that's actually visible learning as opposed to visible thinking routines. So it's different, but there is a connection there. So we have visible learning, we have visible thinking, two separate things. Okay, lots of no's, lots of not sure's, which means you are in 100% the right place, which is good to know. And you're right, Gulden, yeah, the PYP classes do use them a lot, absolutely. So what are they? Well, they are the product of research from Harvard Graduate School of Education in the United States. And it goes under the heading of Project Zero, which quite frankly conjures up images of secretive bases or sects in the United States, much like Area 51, for example. So kind of some secretive things going on there. And their mission is essentially to understand and to enhance learning, thinking, and creativity for individuals and groups. And what they are, there's essentially a framework that is both broad and flexible, that's been designed for enriching classroom learning and content areas, while at the same time fostering student development and extending and deepening their thinking. But essentially they are teaching tools to be used in the classroom on a regular basis in the everyday classroom, hence the idea of routines. And to put that into a simple sentence, they're short, easy to learn mini strategies that extend and deepen students' thinking and become part of the structure of everyday classroom life. They are not complicated. They are simple little routines you can drop into different lessons, little activities to draw students in, to get them thinking, to get them talking, to get them communicating with one another. And what they've done really nicely, actually, they've created a toolbox of these routines, which they've kind of classified under different headings on the website. So you can see there the website, or you can scan the QR code to take you to the website. So we've got things like objects and systems, perspective taking, global thinking, digging deeper, perspectives, controversies, and dilemmas. So they cover a huge array of kind of areas, let's say. But the place really to start is with the core thinking routines, because these are the most common, the easiest, the most flexible ones to use. And we'll be looking at some of these later on. But what I will say is there are over 100 different routines within the toolbox. And some of them will go into multiple categories, okay? It will just depend very much. But that kind of shows you the flexibility of them. Now, I'm not going to go into them in too much detail now because we're going to look at some later on, but just give you an idea here of some of the sort of titles. And you might see the names and think, oh, I know this. I've been doing this for a long time, but maybe you didn't make that connection to it being a visible thinking routine per se. So there we've got the core thinking routines. We've got introducing and exploring ideas. Thank you, Simonette. Those are two good ones. You've mentioned there. Perspectives, dilemmas, and controversies as well. But like I said, we're going to look at some of these later on. And you might think, my goodness, there's so many of them. Like I say, there's over 100 of them on the website. How am I going to know which ones work best for my classrooms? Well, you don't necessarily need to, because I've done the hard work for you. I kind of went through it all, worked with them, found out which ones worked best in our context as English language teachers. Because these routines were not developed specifically for language teachers, they were developed for arts programs mainly. But they have very practical applications with what we are doing as well. Okay, so why then should we use them in our lessons beyond what we've already spoken about in terms of preparing students for real life? Well, I'm going to leave it to Ron Richard, who is the head of Project Zero, the kind of the brains behind these routines. And he very simply says that learning is a consequence of thinking, not something extra we should tag on for good measure, but something in which we must actively engage to promote our own and others' learning. And this is important, not just for teachers, but for other students too. Because I think for many students, thinking is an invisible activity, right? And so by making the thinking visible, it shows students how they are learning, how they are thinking. It lets them into the secret of learning by seeing teachers and peers explain their thinking and their reasoning. So it makes them actually more aware of their own learning processes, their own thinking processes, allowing for greater reflection. But it's more than that. There are other benefits as well. So if we dive a little bit more deeply into the idea of developing their thinking and learning, there are a number of different thinking dispositions or habits of mind that they are looking to develop. So, for example, it's about observing closely and describing. Not just looking at something on the surface, but trying to get under the surface, under the skin of the topic, the text, the picture, the video, whatever it is that they're studying. But equally, it's about building explanations and looking at interpretations of the topic, the content that they're using. It's reasoning with evidence. And this is important because nowadays, students get information from all kinds of places which may or may not be reliable. And therefore, they need to be able to reason with the evidence presented in front of them and decide whether or not it is something that they should be believing or questioning. But equally, it's also about making connections between their lives, what they're reading, and the wider world as well. In other words, helping them to see different viewpoints and perspectives, because we're living in a global world. They're going to be interacting with people from all over the world, just like we are today, with people from all corners of the globe. And therefore, we need to be able to reflect on, consider other people's opinions and viewpoints, because that is reflective of the real world. But more than that, it's about, for me, wondering and asking questions. For far too long, students have answered questions really well. They're great at answering questions because that's how education has been for so many years. But really, what we want them to be doing is asking their own questions rather than just answering them. This will open their mind. It helps to develop more critical thinkers. So there's a few reasons why, and then a few what's the word? Yeah, the different thinking routines, thinking ideas, which are going to help our students to develop into better thinkers. But there's more advantages as well. The research coming out of Project Zero actually shows that there is deeper understanding of content. There is greater comprehension of what it is that they are using. That in turn creates greater motivation of learning. And if there's one thing I get asked more than any other, it's how can I motivate my learners? How can I engage them in the learning process? And the research tells us that actually, if we're including these routines in our classes, it does increase motivation. Of course, not for every student, but as a whole, they see this improvement. And that in turn impacts on their attitude to learning. They become more positive. Why? Because the learning is more student focused. It's about them. It's about what they think, what they believe, what they understand. And I think as soon as we shift the focus away from the teacher and onto the students, learning becomes more relevant, more meaningful to them. And they can connect whatever it is they're learning to their real lives. And that in turn has a knock-on effect on the classroom culture. It creates more enthusiastically engaged thinkers and learners. So lots of really positive reasons why we should be using them. But the final one is, I think, the one that we could argue is most appropriate or most relevant to our scenario as language teachers. And that is that it facilitates a more inclusive and a more communicative classroom. Because what is language learning if it isn't about communication? So it's about providing students with many opportunities in class to speak, to share their views and opinions. And the inclusivity is important here as well, because it involves every single student, not just the strong ones, but the quiet ones, the shy ones, the less confident ones, even the lazier ones, because it's involving them in the process. It's asking them what they think, what they believe, what they understand. So again, it's that whole idea of the learner-centered classroom. So that's a very brief what and why of visual thinking routines. And you can find out loads more about them at the Project Zero website, okay? Just type in Project Zero to Google or whichever search engine you use, and you will be taken straight to their page where there's a huge amount of information available to you there. But let's have a look at how we can use them in class. So like I said already, they weren't explicitly developed for the language classroom, but we can use them very easily for our classes. And I've split this into 3 different areas. We're going to look at visual thinking routines and images. We're going to look at the routines and pre-reading or previewing or pre-topic activities, and also post-viewing, post-reading, and post-topic activities. Okay, so let's start with the images. And if there's one thing that National Geographic is most famous for, it is, of course, amazing photography, which makes these visual thinking routines an absolute ideal fit with National Geographic learning products. So here is an example. And this first routine, I have to say, is the easiest routine to implement of them all. And even better than that, it works every single time. That is, as long as you have got the right kind of images to do it with. And it's very simply called I see, I think, I wonder. And it might be a routine that you're familiar with, but it's so great because it works on different levels. It starts off with those lower order thinking skills of understanding and remembering vocabulary with the I see. I see a shark. I see 3 people. I see a cage. I see lots of blue, for example. Then we have the I think. What do we think is happening here? What's going on? And then the I wonder, which again goes further up Bloom's taxonomy, getting them to analyze, think more deeply about it, get under the skin. It's not just a cool picture, but let's get them wondering what's going on. And so, of course, what we're doing here is we are activating schemata, but it's also all completely learner focused. Everything is generated by them. The teacher is just facilitating the process. So let's see what you wonder about this photograph. So in the chat box, let me know, what do you wonder about this photo? I wonder why the man has got his hand outside of the cage. I wonder if he's a little bit crazy. Lovely Isabel, I wonder if it's the only shark. I wonder if it's fake. Great, Claudia, that's a great question that we want students to ask. I wonder if he's scared. I wonder if he's playing around, the shark that is. I wonder what the shark's thinking. Maybe he thinks it's some kind of game, who knows? I wonder how cold the water is. I wonder how it would be if the shark was inside the cage and the men outside. I wonder where it is. I wonder if they're scientists. I wonder what the shark thinks. Thank you, Leah. I wonder where the camera was positioned. That's a great one, right? Who took this picture? Oh, so I wonder who took the picture. I wonder if that person was also in a cage. I wonder what kind of studies they're doing. I wonder what's inside the shark's mouth. I wonder how big the shark actually is. I wonder if it's too difficult for the scuba diver to get a wonderful photograph. And on it goes. It is self-perpetuating because the only limit here are the students' own imaginations, their own kind of critical analysis of the photograph. And so what we then do, we kind of write some of these I wonder statements on the board, And we then put them back onto the students and get them in groups to discuss them. Well, what do you think? You know, how do you think the shark is feeling? How do you think the man is feeling? Who do you think took the photograph? How did they take the photograph? What would happen if the oxygen cylinders got damaged? And what we're doing here is, of course, it's just a really nice warmer to a lesson, whether it's starting a topic, starting a reading, but it gets them involved straight away. And of course, it's activating all of that schemata, preparing them for what is to come in the lesson. But at the same time, it's also getting them thinking. So it sort of works on many different levels. Here's another picture. Again, tell me really briefly in the chat box, what is going on here? What do you think is happening? What do you wonder about this particular photograph? And it seems I have an interest in underwater things today. Okay, you think they're trying to grow new coral? I wonder what's, it could be a barbecue, right, Sundays? Yeah, what's the thing? Maybe it's underwater archaeology, maybe they're sieving something, maybe they're doing their research. I wonder what they're sorting. I wonder if they're playing board games. I think they're collecting pieces of coral. I wonder if it's dangerous. Okay. I wonder if it's the desert under the sea. I wonder what the table, I wonder how this table stays still. I wonder why they're there. I wonder how long they stay underwater for. If they haven't got oxygen, I wonder how deep the water is, and so on, right? Again, it keeps coming and coming and coming. And like I say, you know, you get great images throughout any National Geographic Learning product to really prompt this routine, which makes it so effective. But this idea of photography and thinking is not new. 2,500 years ago, in 5th century BC Greece, Aristotle said this: without image, thinking is impossible. They are intertwined. We see something, we have a reaction. It makes us question it. It makes us curious, right? So let's look at another couple of other routines we could do that kind of take advantage of these photos. And one is called Interview the Picture, which is a little bit similar to the I See, I Think, I Wonder, but it's more specific about question formation, writing good questions. And it might be that we provide some language or sentence frames for our students to use, but essentially we're asking them, what questions would you like to ask the person or the people in the photograph? Or indeed, in this case, another shark. So let's see what questions you would like to ask the photo. Why is the shark following you? Are you scared? Have you trained it? Thank you, Maya and Isabel. Were you scared? Thank you, Sharon. Is it your new friend? Is it for dinner? Why are you taking a picture of Jaws? Again, who took the photograph? How did you take it? Clearly it's some kind of drone. Why are you there? Where is it? How fast can you paddle? Have you seen the shark even? Exactly. Are you doing research during vacation, right? So many questions you can do. How often do you go canoeing? How often do you see the sharks? Has a shark ever attacked your canoe? And so on. Again, it's almost self-perpetuating. It never stops. And it might be then what you want to do is take some of these questions, write them on the board, and then you can get students to role play the photograph as a more creative activity. So it kind of springboards into something more communicative as well. So again, a really nice kind of task on a number of different levels. One more that we can do with photographs is called the 3 dimensions of viewing. And the first viewing is called the personal viewing. It's essentially reflecting on how you connect with the photograph. So, for example, how does the photo make you feel and why? Does it remind you of anything? What is that thing that it reminds you of? Do you think it's positive or negative? Why? Why not? Okay, so it's making that personal connection. Again, it's talking about reflection. Okay, nostalgic. I used to write those ages ago. Right, perfect. A lot of people will feel nostalgic about this. For me, it makes me feel sad because clearly something's happened here that it's now been taken over by nature, for example. Maybe some people think it's funny. And the point here is that everyone has a different reaction. They might be similar, but they're going to be different a lot of the time because it's personal. And the great thing about all of these routines is that there's no right answer. There's no wrong answer. It's just how you feel. And if there's one thing that stops students speaking in class, it's being asked a question that has a right or wrong answer. Because they don't want to be wrong. They don't want to put their hand up and make a mistake, give the wrong answer, because they'll feel shame, they'll feel embarrassed. So these kind of activities, they're so open-ended that they are inclusive. They're encouraging everybody to join in. The second viewing is probably what we're more familiar with. It's less really about thinking, but I've added it in here anyway. It's the structural viewing or the compositional viewing. So it's looking at the photo and itself. So what is being focused on in the photograph? What might lie outside of the image? What lies beyond it? What's in the foreground? What's in the background? There's more of an analysis in that respect, but equally, you're thinking about, like I say, what might lie outside of it. And then the last one is this idea of the critical or the ideological viewing. And this, again, this really gets under the skin. It's more about the analysis of the photograph. What is the story behind it? What message is it trying to convey? What's its purpose? And can it actually be interpreted in more than one way? And if so, what are those different interpretations of the photograph? So again, I'm going to ask you in the chat box very quickly to tell me what you think is the message, the story of this photograph. What's it trying to tell us? Because photographers, they like to tell stories through their photos. But it's up to us to try to work it out. And this, of course, leads into the idea of visual literacy as being a key skill for students. Okay, good, Miranda. Maybe it's about loving and caring for nature. Maybe it's about inspiring them to be vets. Okay, kids learning empathy. I love that, Galia. Yeah, really good. Talking about future jobs, maybe. Yeah. Maybe it's a celebration of achievements. Children learn about healthcare or animal healthcare. Definitely. Taking care of wildlife. Thank you, Alejandra. Animal care again. Vet life. Learning about different careers. Exactly. I mean, I don't want to say there's a right or wrong answer here, particularly, because it's open to your interpretation. But actually, this photo it's about Bob the flamingo. The flamingo has a name. And actually, Bob has a broken wing because he flew into the window of a building and was rescued by the vet here, Dr. Odette Doest. And essentially, she now takes Bob to different schools to teach them about conservation and about looking after animals or the wildlife on the island of Curacao in the Caribbean. So it's a really nice story there. And it's like, I like the message of it, of taking animals into schools and showing them to them things that they might not otherwise see, right? Okay, so let's have a look at some other routines, but which are linked specifically to pre-topic or pre-reading. And the first one is a brainstorming activity called Go-Go. And this stands for give one, get one. And this is another really good routine for activating schemata, for uncovering students' knowledge of a subject. And like I say, at the core of it is a brainstorming activity, sharing ideas and engaging with one another. But it's different to brainstorming because there are different parameters, okay? Because when you do a brainstorming class, let's say I've asked you a question, let's brainstorm, I don't know, vocabulary connected to the environment. What happens invariably? I'll tell you what happens. A small number of students call out ideas. And then the quiet ones, the shy ones, the lazier ones, they just sit at the back, not saying anything. So when we call it a class brainstorm, it isn't a class brainstorm because it's only involving a certain number of students. The go-go routine is inclusive of everybody in the class. It is highly communicative, highly collaborative. So how does it work? Well, you have your topic. So in this case, we've got the environment. And we, as a teacher, we set a statement or a question. So in this case, what do you think are the 3 best ways to be more environmentally friendly? Now, students do this on their own. They write 3 ideas down. It doesn't have to be sentences. It could be a phrase. It could be a word. That's absolutely fine. When everybody is ready, everyone stands up and you have a class mingle activity. And you find a partner and you give them one of your ideas. So for example, I might say to Miranda, so I think one of the best ways to be more environmentally friendly is to take more public transport. Because, and I explain why. And Miranda says, okay, that's really good. I'm going to add it to my list because she didn't have it on her list. So I then say to Miranda, can you give me an idea? I'm getting one from her. And Miranda might say to me, well, I think becoming a vegetarian is a really good way to help the environment, for example. And I might say, okay, that's interesting. Why? And she has to explain to me why that is a good idea. And I can add it to my list. And then we find new partners. And we keep changing until my list of 3 has become a list of 10, 11, 12. Because I'm giving and getting from all the different students in the class. So we are listening to each other. We're sharing our ideas. We're elaborating on them. And once the activity is over, we can create feedback. At which point, every single student in the class, even the quiet ones, the shy ones, they have something to say. Because even if they weren't confident about their initial ideas, they've been given other ideas, or their ideas have been reinforced by other students. So they can then share that with the whole class. But like I say, everybody's involved, and it's a more effective way of doing brainstorming. It may not be more efficient because it takes time, but you have to sort of balance that up. But it's a really nice activity. Routine. And this one is called the 3 Whys. And this is a routine to help them to see things from different perspectives. Okay. So what are the 3 Whys? So yeah, Marisol's asked about, if you're teaching this online, absolutely you'd put them into breakout rooms in this respect. Yeah. Okay, so the 3 Whys. What are the 3 Whys? Well, it's about looking at things from different perspectives. The first perspective being about me. So here we've got a topic all about pollution, plastic specifically. Why might this topic, or why might this question matter to me as an individual? And you know what? It might be some students say, I don't know, it doesn't matter to me as an individual. I don't care. That's fine. That's their decision. But hopefully some students do say why it matters to them. So we start off with that kind of egocentric perspective. But then we want them to look a little bit wider on the process. Why might it matter to the people around me? My family, my friends, city, nation. You're right. And this one is great for encouraging empathy or understanding or different viewpoints, right? Because if it doesn't matter to me, well, it might matter to other people. I hope it matters to other people. And so you note this down. And then the third why, can you guess the third why? I'm sure you can. We've gone from me to you, essentially, to the third why. The world. Thank you, Claire. Exactly that. Why might it matter to the world? And for sure, they have lots to say about this. So even if they don't think it impacts on them tremendously, or even on their friends and family, it definitely impacts on the world. So these routines work especially well when we are using real world content, when we are talking about the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which is obviously a key thing in education at the moment, those 2030, 17 Sustainable Development Goals. It works really nicely because it helps them to have different perspectives, to ask questions. Okay, we're going to look at one more pre-reading routine. And this one is called Think, Puzzle, Explore. And again, it's a routine for activating schemata. And I should say at this point, you would not do all of these routines in one lesson. Of course you wouldn't. You pick and choose which one is going to be best for this particular topic, this particular reading, listening, whatever it might be, okay? So yeah, think, puzzle, explore. It starts off by activating schemata. What do you think you know about this topic? So we've got a topic here all about fast fashion. Well, I think I know that fast fashion is really bad for the environment, for example. I think I know that fast fashion is poor quality clothing, for example. I think fast fashion encourages us to buy things that we don't really need or we wear once, or whatever it might be. You tell me in the chat box, what do you think you know about fast fashion? Okay, you think it's pollution on water, it pollutes water. You think it's affordable, it's not sustainable. Thank you, Agnieszka. You think it's cheap, you think child labor, you think textile waste, awful for the environment. Thank you, Maya and Anastasia. Chemical dyes, thank you, Anastasia. It's killing the planet. Eco-friendly, maybe. It's definitely extremely harmful to the environment. Thank you, Carla. Child labor, low quality. Okay, great. So we think we know lots about it. Great. Isn't all fashion fast? Well, I mean, it's a good discussion, right? Then we move on to the puzzle. What questions or what puzzles do you have? In other words, what do you want to know more about fast fashion? So I want to know just how bad is it for the environment, for example. And Sondes, you made a really good point there. It does sound like KWL. It's very, very similar to KWL. But I think with Think, Puzzle, Explore, it works better with, let's say, older students, university level students, because it just kind of prods them in a slightly different way. So tell me, what questions do you have about fast fashion? Okay, who's behind it and why? Who is the worst fast fashion producer? Why do people buy such low quality goods? How do they get rid of them? How do they dispose of them? Do they recycle them? Are they recyclable? In what ways does fast fashion affect the world? Brilliant. These are all great questions. And what this does, it creates a purpose for reading or a purpose for viewing or listening that is personal to the students. It's not just about answering comprehension questions. It's about answering questions that you have as an individual. So it is quite a good differentiation task from that perspective. And then, of course, once we've done the reading, watch the video, we come back to it and talk about what does it make us want to explore? What do we want to know more about, for example? So at this point, we're actually going to watch this video all about fast fashion. I'm just going to change my sharing screen to go to our online platform called Spark, which is basically a fully integrated, fully interactive version of the course book. So I'm going to click on the video here. And as you're watching the video, I want you to think very carefully about any of the questions that you had asked already, and think about, are those questions being answered? Or maybe it's creating new questions, okay? What does it make you want to explore more about? Just gonna jump to there. So sit back and enjoy.
Consumers are increasingly aware that the fast fashion industry generates waste, pollution,
Alex, we can't hear it right now. I heard it at the beginning.
Oh, you can't hear?
Yeah, I think you might have turned the volume
Cool.
down.
companies are taking a
Hang on.
different
Now we can hear.
fashion
Okay, I'll get back.
industry generates waste, pollution, toxic chemicals, poor working conditions, and more. Environmentally, the fashion business is more damaging and more polluting than any other industry apart from the oil industry. But a new generation of clothing companies are taking a different approach. Their mission is to change our relationship to the clothes that we wear, and at the same time, to change the approach of the fashion industry. Perhaps the biggest problem with the fashion industry is that consumers buy too many clothes, and that's part of why there is so much waste. To tackle this problem, companies such as Y Closet in China are now offering consumers the option to rent clothes instead of buying them. Customers sign up for the online service and pay a fixed monthly fee. They get their clothes in the mail. The advantage is that when you've finished with them, you simply send them back to be cleaned and then rented by someone else. The result is that people buy far fewer clothes. But the problem is not just that consumers buy too many items of clothing. It's also that having bought them, they don't wear them. Companies such as By Rotation are tackling this problem too, with a peer-to-peer rental service. Peer-to-peer rental services allow customers to rent their clothes to each other. By Rotation never actually sees the clothes themselves. Users of the brand create an account and take photos of their clothes with the app. They decide how much it will cost to rent each item of clothing and how long someone can rent it for. As with Y Closet, the result is that consumers buy fewer clothes and so generate less waste. Clothing rental companies are not the only ones tackling the problem of waste. Amazingly, between 15 and 40% of the fabric from a normal clothing factory ends up as waste on the factory floor. One way to reduce waste is to use this discarded fabric to make clothes. That's exactly what Cambodian company Tonle does. Tonle buys this waste fabric and uses it to make its own fashion collection. Not only that, but Tonle's factories avoid using toxic chemicals. In fact, they claim 80% of their chemicals used for coloring or dyeing clothes are edible. Another company that is trying to turn fashion around is Spanish brand EcoElf. They want their fabric to not only do no harm, but to also benefit the environment. So, EcoElf gets the material to make their fabric from the ocean itself. Every year, they remove over 150 tons of plastic from the ocean. This plastic is then turned into fabrics, which are used to make shoes and clothing.
Okay, I'm going to stop it there because we're going to run out of time. But you kind of get the idea, right? So all that kind of pre-work with the Think Positives board prepares you for the viewing. And it's a really thought-provoking video, I'm sure you'll agree, right? And it prompts more questions. It prompts a reaction. Okay, and that's what we're kind of trying to get our students to think about and to verbalize that as well. So in terms of having watched the video, you know, we can ask that question, what does it make you want to explore more about? But we can put that into its own activity almost. So we now look at some sort of post-viewing, post-reading activities. One that I really enjoy doing is called 3, 2, 1, because in real life, when you've watched something that's particularly interesting, or if you've read something that's piqued your imagination and interest, what do you do with that information? Do you just keep it to yourself? I'm going to guess not. What do you do with it? You share it. Exactly, Andrea. You share it. You tell it to other people, because that's what we do in real life. We don't answer comprehension questions. We talk about it with our friends. So this routine helps you to do that. So, for example, and there is flexibility in the types of statements you give to the students. But in this case, I want you to tell your partner 3 things that you found particularly interesting or shocking or surprising about the video. So, for example, I found it particularly interesting that the company Tonle has 80% of their dyes are edible, which is quite incredible if it's true. In this case, 2 things I'd like to know more about. So maybe I want to know more about one of these companies, and maybe I want to know more about a specific comment or statement that was made. But it's kind of facilitating further inquiry. Okay, Claudia, great. I was going to ask this one as well. The fact that it's the second most polluting industry, that's amazing, isn't it? But I was keeping this one for my last point here, which is one thing that I would like to fact check. Because, as we've already stated already, it's making sure our students are aware that they should be questioning the evidence, making sure something is actually true. And so the fact that, you know, it says that it is the second most polluting industry after the oil industry is quite a strong statement. So I want to fact check that. So really quickly in the chat box, just tell me one thing for any of these. So maybe one thing that you found particularly interesting, one thing that you'd like to know more about, or one thing that you would like to fact check. Let me know, right? Well, right, Alad, it's horrific. Fashion industry has a lot to answer for in terms of sustainability, right? Thank you. When I can't pronounce your name, I'm sorry. It's interesting that people are actually willing to rent their clothes. I know it's an interesting concept, right? Does it actually work? How much does it cost? Are there more alternatives? Thank you. Yeah, what companies in your country, in this case the UK, are more ethical? What are they doing? Yeah, I mean, Ecolabs, it's an amazing company using plastic from the ocean. I mean, that's staggering. But it's creating conversation. That's the key thing here. Okay, so that's a very kind of oral activity to reflect on what they've read or seen. But if we want to do one that's a little bit more academic, we could do one that's called the +1 routine. And this is a routine that provides learners with the structure for identifying key ideas and committing them to memory after being presented with new information through reading or viewing. And essentially, it's kind of like a note-taking task, but it is more interactive, it's more collaborative than just note-taking. But what it does, it actually helps them with what is known as retrieval practice. Because what it does, it makes students, or stops students being passive recipients of information and turns them into active processors or active users of that information through retrieval and application. So, how does it work? Well, let's say, for imagine, we watched that video, you've not taken any notes. I want you to write down everything that you can remember or you can recall. Now, I might give my students 2 or 3 minutes for that, but is every student going to remember the same information? Of course not. They remember different things. So, once they've made their notes, for 2 or 3 minutes, however long you decide, they pass their notes to the person next to them. That person reads these new notes and they add 1 or +1 statement to it. So they could add a whole new point, a new idea that the previous person missed. They could elaborate on what they've written. So adding a new detail. You can make connections, okay? But it's developing that person's notes. And you would repeat that process at least 2 or 3 times. So that when you get your original notes back, they have been vastly elaborated on or added to by your classmates. So essentially what it's doing is creating collaborative note-taking in many respects. And what it also does, it shows you how other students are learning, how they're remembering, okay? So when you get your sheet back, you review it. What have they remembered? How have they added it? What information has been shared with you by your classmates? And then they share it with each other. So they're back into groups. Okay, on my list, I've got these things. So you regroup them and they share their ideas. And hopefully at that point, they have a much fuller picture, which can be used as the basis for further discussion. I mean, you could add them a 3-2-1 or other follow-up tasks. For example, and this is one of my favorite routines called the 4 C's. Now, you think you know what the 4 C's are of 21st century thinking: collaboration, communication, critical thinking, and creativity. This is a different 4 C's, and it's a routine that is a structure for a text-based discussion. And essentially, it's getting students to look at a text or a video from a different perspective. So the first C is about making connections. What connections do you draw between what you've read, what you've watched, and your own life, or indeed your other learning? So it's cross-curricular from that perspective. Now, of course, here, it's a very easy topic for them to make connections to, right? Because they all wear clothes, they all have an interest or some kind of interest in fashion, and they can have an opinion about it. The second C is about challenge. So we want students to question what they've read or heard. So what ideas, what positions, what assumptions do you want to challenge or argue with? What do you want to disagree with? Because we want to show them it's okay to have your own viewpoint, your own opinion, and that you don't have to accept everything that has been said in an article or a video. So it's kind of freeing up that mind. The third C is about concepts. So a bit like the 3-2-1, what do you think are the most important points? What's the most important message to hold on to from the video or the text? Have different opinions here. Well, I think this was the most important thing to remember. You might disagree. That's okay. It is a discussion. Okay. And then the fourth C, can you guess what the fourth C might be? Any suggestions? Challenge, concepts, and communicators are good. Anita, I think you know this. It is changes, which is a bit like conclusions, like a few of you said. In other words, what changes in attitude, what changes in thinking, or indeed action are suggested by the talk, either for you or for others? And maybe what will you do? So in this case, it hopefully makes you think, well, actually, you know what? I should definitely be thinking more carefully about how I consume fashion. So it's a really nice layers of discussions. And it's called the 4 C's, but you could just do 2 of the C's if you wanted to, or 3, or even just 1, depending on how long you have in class. But certainly each one could, depending on your class, last a significant amount of time. Okay, I'm nearly finished, but I've got 2 more routines I want to share with you very quickly. And the first one is called, we had the 4 C's, now we have the 4 IFs. And this is a really nice activity to do in conjunction with the 3 Ys, which we saw earlier on in terms of as a pre-reading or previewing task. And this routine was kind of developed to build on students' exploration of an issue and make them think about what they can do, what action they can take following on from a topic. So the first if is, if I take this idea seriously. So it's kind of generating possible courses of action. So in other words here, what action can they take? If I take this idea seriously, I will do this, 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 and this, for example. The second if, is if my community takes this idea seriously, my school, my friends, my family, and so forth. What can we do? And then obviously the third if is if our nation or if the world takes this idea seriously, what can we do and what will be the result of that? However, for me, the most powerful of the ifs is the fourth if. And yes, it does practice conditional Sundays. But what do you think the fourth if might be? We've got I, community, and then the world. But what might come as the fourth if? Any guesses? Put those critical thinking hats on. Yes, Virginia. What if we don't do anything? What will happen? So if we don't address this issue, if we don't take action, what's going to happen? And I think that can be a really stark warning to students and encourage them to think, well, actually, if I don't do this, if my community doesn't do this, if the world doesn't do this, this is going to happen. Therefore, we need to take action. And so, you know, with all of these ideas, they work especially well with this real world content, focusing on those UN Sustainable Development Goals or any issues facing the world. Okay, my time is pretty much up. So I was going to conclude by just recapping what we've gone through and why we should be using these visible thinking routines in the classroom. So we should use them to encourage curiosity in topics, to get them engaged, to get them focused. We should use them to develop deeper thinking, deeper analysis, because the more they do that, the more meaningful it's going to become for them. Use them to drive communication. That is the goal of language learning, to get them using the language in an authentic, meaningful way. And that in turn, of course, makes it more personalized, makes it more meaningful for them. Remember, it becomes more inclusive of everybody in the class. And ultimately, it encourages reflection as well about their role in society, their ideas, and of course, what they can do, what action they can take. So I just want to finish with a quote from Albert Einstein, because we cannot talk about thinking without referencing him. And I want to leave you with this quote. Education is not about learning the facts, but training the brain to think. So if you leave with anything today, I want you to leave with that thing in mind. Yes, we are English language teachers. We're teaching grammar, vocabulary, and the skills, but think about education more holistically. What should we be aiming for? So think about that and take some time to reflect as well. We've gone through a number of routines here. Which ones are you going to try out in your class? I'm going to share the link with you in a moment where you can download all of the PDFs as well. But before I do that, I just want to sort of reiterate all of these pages, all of these lessons, they came from National Geographic Learning's Reflect series, which is a dual strand listening and speaking, reading and writing course, 6 levels, A1 to C1. You can find out more at eltngl.com/reflect. And to find out more about the thinking routines, you can go to pzharvard.edu/thinking routines, or just scan the QR code. It will take you directly there. And so once you're there, you can download all the different PDFs, and it gives you a really nice structure for using them. And finally, you can stay connected with all things National Geographic Learning by looking at future webinars, by looking at our blog, and connecting with us on social. And I should say, actually, on the InFocus blog, there is a blog I wrote all about visible thinking routines, where I highlight my 5 favorite ones in more detail. Some of which, well, in fact, all of which we've focused on in today's session. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your patience, because I've overrun a little bit. And I believe there are a couple of questions as well. I'm just going to look at the questions. Okay, Saunders asks how to help students asking simple yet tough questions. Okay, there's a routine I didn't share with you called I think it's just called question frames. And essentially it's giving students the frame of a question. For example, what if, how come, what would happen if, why don't we do X, Y, Z? And it's providing them with that framework to add in their own kind of ideas to the question, okay? So that's a routine you can find out more about. Can we use NG pictures in our lessons? I mean, you can use any pictures in your lessons. You know, there's lots of places online where you can find pictures which are royalty free. Maybe not National Geographic ones all the time, but there are lots of places you can find photos. And one of my favorite places to go is a website called Guardian, the Guardian newspaper in the UK, Pictures of the Day, which are really engaging, thought-provoking photos. Anita's asked about GoGo. How many minutes do you suggest to allocate for a GoGo for a class of 20 students? Well, what I say is they don't need to talk to all the students in the class. Maybe 9 or 10 others is enough, okay? But I mean, a GoGo, it could last 20 minutes. Let's say 1 minute per student, so that's 10 minutes there. And then obviously the initial preparation time as well, plus feedback. But I mean, it could last the whole lesson, quite honestly. If you were that way inclined, it's one of those activities that just self-perpetuates, keeps going and going and going. A couple of questions about certificates. Yes, absolutely. As we mentioned at the start, all participants will receive a certificate and a link to the recording in the next 3 business days. Okay, that will be automatically sent out by the Zoom platform. Okay.
Well, thank you, Alex. Thank you so much. That was a great session.
That's my pleasure.
I learned a lot, and thank everyone for attending. Immediately after this session, you're going to be directed to a feedback survey to let us know what you think. So please take your time to fill that survey out and let us know what you think of this one and what you'd like to see in the future. That said, thank you very, very much. And I put in the chat the URL where you can find out more about our academic series, Reflect, Listening, Speaking, and Reading, Writing. So thank you, everyone. Be well.
Yeah, thank you, Tracy. And
thanks so much, Alex.
No, my pleasure. Thank you to all of you again. Have a lovely rest of your day. It might be a little bit of your evening. It might be the whole day, as it is for Tracy. So take care, stay safe, and I hope to see you all very soon. Bye for now.
Bye.